chat below. You can feel free to ask questions in the chat to our speakers throughout the event, and then later we will try to collect these questions and answer them in the last part of our event today, the question and answer section. So for now, I would actually already invite you to use the chat. To our participants who have joined us, please let us know who you are, what organization you're from, and where in the world you might be joining us from today. And then maybe we can try to have a bit of a picture of who's participating in the event today. So feel free to introduce yourself in the chats. So hello, Sana, welcome.
Hi, everybody. I'm so sorry. My minister just came in, so she's going to join you very shortly.
Thank you for that update. Thank you for that update. So thanks. So feel free. I hope that our guests joining today can introduce themselves in the chat, and we can interact in that way. So I would like to follow up now with a poll, a Mentimeter. While everyone continues to introduce themselves in the chat, maybe we can also get a little bit of an idea of what people feel around women's participation in their country. So we would like to host a poll through Mentimeter. What you have to do is you go to menti.com and then you enter the code. I hope that the team can paste the Mentimeter link in the chat and the code, which you can also read on the slide. And the question that we are asking is, in one word, describe how you feel about women's participation in decision-making in your country. So to access this and to answer, you could go to menti.com and you type in the code. So we're starting to see some answers come in. In one word, describe how you feel about women's participation in decision-making in your country. We invite everyone who has joined to please go to menti.com. You type in the code 868-25337. And so far we've received ignored. We've received that it should be better. And I like that that has been made into one word. No progress since decades, indeed, poor. And on the other side of the scale, we're seeing good. Obviously, there are disparities across all of our countries. Limited, undervalued, minimal, sad. Need parity on elections, on election lists. To everyone who just joined, we're doing a poll, so please go to menti.com, enter in the code, and there you can enter in and respond to this question. In one word, describe how you feel about women's participation in decision-making in your country. And of course, this is our topic for today. There's a lot more coming up that I can see, underrepresented, disparity, we are going backwards, underutilized. Clearly, there is a lot of work to be done. We haven't seen any excellent or very good yet. And I think that says something. And therefore, I'm happy to host this event today where we're going to delve much deeper into this issue with you all and with our speakers. So thank you for that. Thank you for responding to our Mentimeter. Thanks. I would like to say a few words also that many of our speakers today are from women's rights organizations and are embedded in social movements from the grassroots to the global level. And such organizations and movements have historically played major roles in advancing gender equality and women's participation in public policy. So with the support of our Women 2030 program over the last 5 years, women's rights and feminist organizations in 45 countries have engaged in Agenda 2030 policy processes and have let their voices be heard at the policy table. They are bringing systemic, feminist, and an intersectional lens into policy processes, which has helped to reveal dynamics of power that must be addressed to achieve Agenda 2030. So today, in line with the CSW65's priority theme of women's full and effective participation in decision-making, our event will bring together feminist leaders from across the world to share the results of their advocacy to expand women's participation in decision-making. And these are, of course, also presented in our Global Shadow Report, which I hope our team can share in the chat now. This report is called Gender Equality on the Ground, Feminist Findings and Recommendations for Achieving Agenda 2030. Our event will also today share good practices from local activists from Thailand, Liberia, Kenya, Georgia on achieving women's increased and meaningful participation in decision-making. We also have speakers from the European Commission and also the Minister of State for the Environment in Nigeria. So we're very happy to welcome our speakers. And now I would already like to go to our first speaker, who will continue a bit of the introductions, and that is Winnie Lichuma from Women Environmental Program Kenya and Nigeria, and she is also the former chair of Kenya's Gender Equality Commission. So again, a reminder to all our speakers to please speak slowly. We have interpretation, sign language, live captioning, so thank you, please keep that in mind. So Winnie Lichuma, please could you take the floor and share a little bit with us?
Thank you, Jeanette, and good afternoon from Nairobi. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all our listeners. Another good opportunity for us to meet here as women, though virtually. We know the ritual has been that we all head to New York during this period. But a wonderful opportunity that we can meet you through this mode. My name is Winnie Lichuma. As already introduced, I chair the board of Women Environment Program that is based in Abuja, Nigeria, but I'm based myself in Kenya, Nairobi. So looking at this event we put together as a team, and my task is very simple. It's just to introduce what this network is all about. So the Women CSW Network to Realize the Sustainable Development Goals Project, also known as the Women 2030 Project, is a coalition of 4 global gender and women's organizations that is supported by the Commission to work towards contributing to the achievement of sustainable development goals in a greater responsive manner. Of course, we know SDG 5 is on gender equality and empowerment of women and girls, but we are looking at it as an enabler for all the other 16 goals. Members of this coalition include, and we'll be hearing from some of them, Women Engaged from a Common Future, WECF, Women Environment Program, that is WEP from Nigeria, Asia Pacific Forum on Women, Law and Development, APWLD, and the Global Forest Coalition, GEC. Now, in the past 5 years, right from the year 2016, the coalition has supported women's rights and feminist organizations in 45 countries to engage in Agenda 2030 and climate-related processes. and let their voices be heard at the policy table. It's one thing to have women participate, but it's another to have women take a seat at the policy decision making table. And so here we pride in having women that have sat at the policy table. The activities the coalition has engaged in have formed three major areas. Allow me just to run through them. One is capacity building for civil society organizations to be equipped with the skills to advocate for SDGs, so that as they are getting to get the women to sit at the table, that we are sitting at the table with capacity, knowledge, and skills. So that has been one area. The second area has been awareness raising about the SDGs. In most countries, of course, heads of state go and do sign on to this documentation, but we do not see that translated in actionable points at the country level. So this program has been an awareness raising program to enable the SDGs to be understood at the ground level. The last has been advocacy to influence laws, policies, and actions that contribute to the achievement of SDGs. One aspect around international law when governments sign onto an international obligation, the expectation is that they come and turn it into laws, in policies, in administrative processes, so that they get to be implemented. And this is exactly what this program sought to do, to advocate, to influence the laws, the policies that have come out of these countries. This event presents an opportunity for results, experiences, and lessons from the 5-year program of this coalition to be shared by the members. And here we will hear what has been achieved, what challenges there have been, and the Women 2030 project has influenced policies. We'll hear about that in different regions. It has empowered different women economically, socially. It has reduced violence against women, which we know is a great vice that still runs across, that prevents women from getting into the decision-making table, especially in political decision-making spaces. So we have organized this because we wish to showcase what the achievement of this project has been. And when we talk about women, we are talking about women in all categories: young women, older women, women from marginalized communities, women that have been marginalized, women with disabilities. So categorically, the marginalized communities, the women with disabilities did get an opportunity to participate. And therefore, this event will repose confidence about capacity of women among the member states and other stakeholders, leading to creation of opportunities that are ready for women to come up and grab. And therefore, colleagues, I will be giving it back to Jeanette. And as you listen to every speaker, please be able to tease out some of the achievements that are key in terms of country participation. Thanks, Jeanette, and over back to you.
Thanks so much, Winnie. Thanks so much for introducing the Women 2030 program and so passionately sharing what we've been trying to do with women's and feminist organizations over the last years. So before we continue, I would like to remind all of our participants today to please ask questions for our speakers in the chat. We will collect them. I would also kindly remind you to please keep yourself muted when you're not speaking, and your video off when you're not speaking, because this helps us with the internet bandwidth connection to be able to provide sign language. So thanks a lot. And yes, please keep the questions coming in the chat. That's very much appreciated. So now I would like to move on and to introduce Marlene Holzner, who is from the European Commission's Directorate General for International Partnerships. She is the Deputy Director General responsible for directorates on human development, migration, governance and peace, and local authorities, civil society organizations and foundations. So Marlene, you will talk to us a bit more about strategic cooperation with civil society, I believe. So I would like to give you the floor now. Thanks a lot. You're just on mute, Marlene. Please feel free to unmute.
Can you see me?
We can hear you, and now we can't see you, but before I could. Yes, that's good. I can see you now.
Okay, wonderful. Then it's fine.
Wonderful.
Yes, my name is Marlene Holzner. I am in charge of a unit who is dealing with civil society and also with women's organization. And that is what I'm asked to discuss with you about today, which I'm very happy to do so. But as I've seen that directions in the introductions on the women's situation on the ground, I've seen it was a little bit negative, I thought, which undoubtedly in many, many countries it is. I just wanted to start with a positive note. I don't know if you do know it, but the European Commission, for the very first time in its over 50 years of history, has a female president, Ursula von der Leyen, and she is very eager to work on women's rights and to push women power. And she has increased our internal quota for management positions for the women. We are at the moment at 40%, and she has raised this target by 50%. And I'm very pleased about that, because I think it's always good to talk about what the others should achieve, but you should also lead by an example. And I'm very happy that we will be able to lead by example, because in a few years' time, there will be 50 managers at all the levels in the European Commission will be female. The second point I wanted to make is that we have, I think, also made a huge, huge step advancing in terms of giving the money also there where, you know, we need it. And that is that an overall majority of all the money that will be spent in development policy in the next few years needs to contribute to gender equality and promote women. And we have actually also a figure put to it. So it's not words, it's a target and a clear also timeline. So from all the money that we spend for partner countries in the years, from this one onwards, 2021 until 2027, 85%, 85, I repeat it because it's a huge number, 85% of all the actions, they must contribute to gender equality. So it's enormous, and I have seen that when I talk to our colleagues in the delegations in the partner countries, that gender, women power, exactly what you meant before, how we can make lives better for women, that is really in the center of our attention in this period in the next 4 years. When we come to strategic cooperation with women organizations and civil society, then I think we have already a long tradition in that. We really, really believe that civil society has a very important role in pushing, nurturing, and making democracy stronger. And why we think that is important? Because we think at the end of the day, if we talk about equality, if we talk about gender equality, if we think about welfare, all the empirical data, they show that if and where you have a striving democracy, then you are also very good at equality and gender equality. There are other regimes where maybe they get in the short term a higher economic growth. But when we talk about equality, gender equality, all these things, then democracy stands out. And this is why we co-finance and support civil society in all our partner countries. And we also support, from the budget, we have women organization as the Women Engagement for a Common Future. We work for now a few years with them. And what does strategic mean? We completely understand that many of the women organizations, it's not that they don't know what to do, but they lack the capacity. They need the money to pay secretaries, to pay the organization, to pay empirical work. And this is where we step in and have a kind of contract, an agreement for a few years, where we say we share these aims and we will trust that with the money we give you, as does the Women Engagement for a Common Future, but also we have regional networks of women organizations, which are also our partners, that you push the cause for the women in Brussels, at the United Nations, at global level, but also at regional level. And via our delegations, we also do that in the partner countries, because we just believe that you are best to be the voice of the women and to influence the policy and the politics so that the outcome is good for women. And we will also continue to do that. We just finished 2020, our 7-year financial period, and we're entering with this year in a new one. We have not done the detailed programming and put in the figure, we want to give to each organization, but I can assure you that the engagement and the financial support for women organizations will not become less, but it will become even more important and bigger than it was in the past. That's all from my side. I wish you a very fruitful discussion and very happy to have been able to address these to you.
Thank you so much, Marlene, for also starting your talk with a positive note about leading by example through the female president of the EU and the increased target of 50% of women's leadership in the EU, and also very much highlighting the role of civil society in strengthening democracy and gender equality, and of course the role of strong women's organizations to influence that. So thank you so much, Marlene. I would now like to introduce Her Excellency Chief Sharon Ikeazor, Honorable Minister of State for Environment, Nigeria. Please could you share with us a little bit about your cooperation with civil society in Nigeria? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jeanette. I'm really glad to be here with all of you. I am Sharon, simply Sharon, not Chief Ikeazor, the Minister of State for Nigeria on Environment. I started off as a civil society person, but in politics. I was part of the Women in Politics Forum, and today I am a decision maker. So as I sit on this table, I will keep on speaking up on women issues. The aspect I would speak on is our cooperation with civil society in Nigeria, as it concerns the development of our National Gender Action Plan on Climate Change. And I must say that the Nigerian government attaches great importance to the 2030 agenda and the role that civil society, women's organizations play as partners in the implementation of our SDGs. And I must state here, as I've always said to my fellow ministers, that if we can achieve SDG 5, then the other SDGs are achievable. So this 2030 agenda, which allows us to address the main crisis which our country faces, We're facing the health crisis of the corona pandemic and the climate crisis. And the climate crisis is accompanied by desertification, which in Nigeria we're already facing, particularly in the north. And you find that the combined health crisis and the COVID pandemic is impacting on the economy and increasing the burden of work, which falls mostly on women. So we need every critical stakeholder to understand these challenges and to realize that to cooperate in partnerships, we'll find better solutions to the problems. And these solutions that are sustainable for climate should be at the same time socially and economically inclusive. And that is why my ministry is cooperating with civil society partners, such as the Women Environmental Program in Nigeria, for us to work on several environmental challenges, particularly on the climate change in the SDGs, and also linking it to our climate plans for the Paris Agreement. And one of the great outcomes is that Nigeria is the first country in Africa to have launched a specific climate gender action plan, for the implementation of our national climate policies. The impact of climate change, we know, undermines our efforts to realize environmental rights of women and other vulnerable populations. So to mitigate the climate change impacts, especially on vulnerable populations, it's of great importance for us to implement specific actions that will build their resilience and promote their environmental rights. So this National Action Plan on Gender and Climate Change will be mainstreamed into programs and policies of all relevant government and non-governmental institutions at the federal level in Nigeria and also at the subnational level, because we know that we can only build social and gender dimensions into technical assistance programs and investment programs right from the beginning. This will make it much more effective. So I will advise that women's empowerment should never be added much later. Once programs have already been designed, we must include the gender perspective of that program. It should never be an afterthought. And in Nigeria, we know that women traditionally have been very active in the economy, and will also ensure that they will have all the opportunities in the new climate smart economy of the future that we're building in Nigeria. To us also, women are the center of human insecurity as it relates to climate change conditions. So therefore, the need for gender mainstreaming in policy development and implementation is key. I'm sure that Women Empowerment Program will discuss further on the implementation of the climate change action. And I do hope other African countries will take this example that Nigeria has set to have climate change and gender mainstreamed, into their policy development. So I look forward to hearing from other speakers at this. And as we move on and be policymakers, let us all be including women in all we do. I'll give you another example of what I did. As a minister, I made sure the person advising me is from the civil society. The leader of World Women Empowerment Program is a special advisor in my office, because civil society, if we stay on the outside and not come in closely to work with policymakers from the inside, it makes our job a lot more difficult. But if we collaborate and work closely together in drawing up policies, not only implementing of policies, in drawing up policies, we'll have women-friendlier policies in governance. So thank you for your attention. I wish you all a fruitful deliberation.
Thank you so much, Minister, for your important. Thank you so much, Minister. Thank you for your important contribution, and also for sharing us your ministry's call for policies for climate change to be socially and economically inclusive, and to include women's environmental rights, and also sharing with us that best practice and example you just mentioned. Thank you, and I encourage participants today to keep asking questions in the chat. We are going to collect them and then ask them to our speakers at the end of our program. And also I would ask that everyone continues to keep their mics and videos muted and off while they're not speaking. And of course we have interpretation, so please access that too. I would like to thank our first three speakers so much for setting up a framing of our event. I would like to now introduce our next speaker, Wanun Permpibul, who is from Climate Watch Thailand, and who can share with us a little bit more about development justice in Thailand and women's groups in Thailand and how they are engaged in the policy processes to influence energy projects. So Wanun, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Climate Watch Thailand is also a member of the Asia Pacific Women Forum on Women Law and Development, or APWLD. We've been engaging with this Agenda 2030 2-3 years ago. And just to provide a context of Thailand, Thailand is located in Southeast Asia region. It's a key member in the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN. And with the long coast of Thailand, in the southern part of Thailand, that makes Thailand quite vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. And when we are looking at the key issue and also the cause of climate change globally, the power mix in Thailand comes from natural gas. Nearly 80% of the power mix is from natural gas, which is the fossil fuel, and the rest remain the imported hydro and also coal, but coal is quite marginalized. And for the government to ensure energy security, the government is looking for alternative to natural gas, and they choose coal. And one of the very key projects the government was promoting 3 years ago was a clean coal power plant in the southern part of Thailand. And that's how we started with the engaging the women's group in the deep south of Thailand to use the opportunity of SDG process to bring the voices of the women to be heard and to discuss and also to challenge the key systemic barriers of why using coal, not other alternatives. And we started this process by looking at how to empower and build capacities of women through a participatory approach. And with that, we used their sustainable practices already happening on the ground, and then match it with the global SDGs. So rather than looking at what people normally call like localization of SDG, we bring the local sustainable practices and sustainable context up to meet the SDGs. So with that, communities and women were able to link the issue of climate change and also with other SDGs. So in a way, they're seeing SDG as in a non-silo manner, rather than looking in a very in a box or in a silo one. Through that participatory process of engaging women, local communities understand and could link the SDG to the climate issues, and also to link the climate issues to other SDGs like health, water resources, marine and coastal resources, and also poverty and health. So with that, through some participatory activities, local women could also identify their own indicators in order to monitor the country's SDG process and implementation. And it has also led to new narratives of women's stories from the ground, impacts of climate change onto women, the impact of the proposed coal-fired power plants on women's livelihood, and also these women's groups are also part of the existing movements, male-dominant movement, to go against coal-fired power plants in that area. So after having those stories from the ground, and also having the women locally identified indicators, women could come up with policy briefs and also their demands. And they have become part of the existing movements to go against coal. And they have been engaged and also reclaimed their political space among the different movements and networks in order to share their own stories and the impacts of climate change and the impacts of coal-fired power plant. And they got together as a very early stage of the movement in the deep south of Thailand in order to influence the policy dialogue, and also to be heard at the different dialogues. And at the end of the day, 2 years ago, after the project, with the contribution and also the new narratives of women and also the impacts of climate change, women could also push forward their voices to stop this coal-fired power plant in that particular area. And it was, even though it's a small winner, but it's such a big step for women to engage in the current systemic issues and to voice their concern. The government decided to shelve that coal-fired power plant. It's not yet enough because coal-fired power plants and fossil fuel power plants are not yet removed from the power development plan, but it was shelved from this area. So this movement and also the process of engaging with women would continue in order to multiply the process into other areas so that there will be more strengthened and empowered women in other groups where there would be a new proposed coal-fired power plant. So I would think that apart from that, women have also, with their own stories and their engagement, they are part of the regional and also national demands and call to demand a total coal exit in order to meet, to contribute to global temperature of well below 1.5 degrees. So I would think that with that, it's not the end in itself, it's a continuation process, and still the movement would still going on to continue to engage with other movements, to inspire other women's groups in order to go against coal, and also to ensure that fossil fuels and coal would be limited and also removed out of the power development plan in Thailand. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Wanun, for sharing your story and for sharing with us about how women in Thailand have identified their own local indicators to monitor SDG policies, that they're claiming political space, voicing their demands, collecting stories of the impacts of climate change. It's very, very inspiring to hear. So thank you so much, Wanun. We're just having a few issues with our screen sharing, but I think it's back on now. I would like to remind all of our participants in this event to please ask your questions in the chat. We're very happy to collect them and read them out later. And also, of course, to please keep yourself muted and with your videos off unless you are speaking. So I would like to move on to our next speaker. Priscilla Achapka from the Women Environmental Program Nigeria. I invite Priscilla to talk to us a little bit more about engaging in climate change policies and gender issues in Nigeria. So I would like to invite Priscilla to join.
Good afternoon, everyone. First and foremost, let me recognize my first state, Sharon Ikeazor, who has already presented most of the work that we have done. You'll recall that at COP25, parties to the United Nations Framework on Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC, agreed to a 5-year enhanced Lima work program on gender and the enhanced gender action plan set us objectives and activities under 5 priority areas that aim to advance knowledge and understanding of gender responsive climate action and its coherent mainstreaming in the implementation of the UNFCCC and the work of parties, including women's full, equal, and meaningful participation in the UNFCCC process. The 5 priority areas under the Lima Work Program on Gender are as follows. Priority area A, capacity building, knowledge management, and communication. Priority B, gender balance, participation, and women's leadership. Priority C, coherence. D, gender responsive implementation and means of implementation. And E, monitoring and reporting. The Lima Work Program set out a 5-year time frame and has 20 activities with 35 deliverables. Now, in line with the above and the recognition of the need for gender mainstreaming in the implementation of its NDCs, in 2016, Nigeria started its journey towards the development of an action plan in order to key into the UNFCCC Parties Agreement of a Gender Action Plan. The year 2020 saw to Nigeria's fully developed National Action Plan on Gender and Climate Change, which was approved by the Federal Executive Council the same year with the full support of our dear Honorable Minister Sharon Ikeazor, who is not only passionate about gender issues, but herself a gender activist, as she has told you, and a friend of the youth. The main goal of the action plan is to ensure that national climate change processes in Nigeria mainstream gender considerations to guarantee inclusivity of all demographics in the formulation and implementation of climate change initiatives, programs, and policies. Now, work partnership with government, noting that gender plays a key role in policy development that targets mitigation and adaptation of climate change by ensuring that a gender equality perspective is adopted. Thus, when it comes to decision making and implementation towards building resilient communities in the face of climate change, the full and meaningful participation of all groups becomes essential. In view of Nigeria's intention to empower and respond to the needs of women in the context of climate change, work in collaboration with the Ministry of Environment and support from different donors and CSOs started the journey towards the development of the National Action Plan on Gender and Climate Change that will focus on effective strategies for integrating gender into the implementation of national climate change initiatives, including the Paris Agreement, particularly the NDCs. The action plan presents milestones for ensuring that in building a climate resilient Nigeria, the important and critical roles of women, youth, and other vulnerable groups are carried along in the implementations of relevant national policies and strategies. The priority sectors covered by this action plan include agriculture, forestry and land use, food security and health, energy and transport, waste management, water and sanitation. The action plan covers a period from 2020 to 2025. It should be mentioned here that although NDCs focus more on mitigation, that is preventing from reducing climate change activity, it also made provisions for adaptation strategies, particularly for developing countries like Nigeria, who are the worst hit by these consequences of climate change. Adaptation to climate change is still key to coping with climate change effects. Adapting to climate change means taking action to prepare for and adjust to both the current effects of climate change and the predicted impacts in the future. The action plan will also help these vulnerable groups, including women, to better adapt to the impacts of climate change with minimal loss of livelihoods, ecosystem, and biodiversity. We must move away from the business as usual way of doing things, which will only lead to increased greenhouse gas emissions and more severe climate impacts. What is the way forward after this development of the action plan? First and foremost, the minister who is spearheading this, our very own minister, has commissioned an assessment of the Gender Action Plan, which is ongoing onto the 5 thematic areas as identified to be mainstreamed in the ongoing NDC's revision. Second, the development of the framework for implementation of the Gender Action Plan is currently ongoing. Just as she said, it's not just to have a national action plan, but what happens to it next. And what she's doing is to make sure that we develop a framework of implementation of this gender action plan, and both for the national level and at the subnational, because the impact of climate change is mostly felt at the subnational. Yes, the national makes the policies, but when it comes to the implementation is carried out at the subnational level. So the Honorable Minister is targeting to make sure that the implementation of the gender action plan is situated at the subnational level, and in this regard, an implementation framework is ongoing in partnership with Women Environmental Program. Just 2 days ago, or last week precisely, an awareness and sensitization of the general public on the action plan has started at the national level, and this is going to cascade to the subnational level, even to the community level. And we are using both conventional media, print and electronic media, social media, and other ways of communicating, including at the community level using town hall meetings. The minister is very passionate, and work together with the ministry is working in all these lines to make sure that the issues of gender and climate change is a government priority, because without this, we will not be able to achieve our NDCs or implement it the way it should. So the government and the civil society, especially Women Environmental Program, are working hand in hand towards the development of all these activities to make sure that they are being implemented at the national and at the subnational level. To conclude my presentation, I just want to use this opportunity to say that, just as the minister has stated, that she's a very gender sensitive person. Apart from being very gender sensitive person, she has informed you that one of her special AC is a woman, and of course is from the civil society. And that is Priscilla speaking to you on this platform. And I want to acknowledge very much the role that the minister is playing in bringing the civil society to the fore and working with the civil society. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Priscilla, for your intervention and for sharing with us so concretely your experience. I would also like to announce to our participants that we unfortunately have some trolls in this event who have tried to hack our event and our screen share, as you saw. We are trying very hard to remove these people. It is extremely unfortunate, and we will be also reporting it to the CSW to create a safer space for us. So I apologize to all of our participants today for that very unfortunate occurrence. So I would like to also now move on and also remind our speakers to speak slowly for our interpretation. So let's continue. I would like to introduce Loretta George from Rescue Women Liberia, who can share with us a little bit about the roles of rural women in breaking the barriers to women's participation in the political space, and share with us a bit the results of her advocacy work. So thanks a lot, Loretta. Go ahead. And please share your video. Yeah.
Thank you very much for having me on the platform. My name is Loretta George, and I work with Rescue Women Liberia. And I would like to share our experience.
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead, Loretta. I can see you. Yes.
Can you see me okay?
I can see you and I can hear you. Yes.
Our experience on the Women2030 project. We started this project in 2020 last year, and the objective of the project was to influence change in the policy that limit women from participating in political and leadership space in Liberia. But Liberia is a country that women political space is a challenge for all women in Liberia. But then due to the limited funds that we had to choose one county. and that county is Lima.
Sorry, Loretta, would you mind speaking a bit slower and a bit louder for our interpreters?
Okay. That county we're working is Lima. Lima is a country that for the past 1 decade and a half has not had any female represented in political space. In the local leadership, we have like 17 men, and out of the 17 men, we have just 1 female who is in a decision-making space of the local government. So what we did was we had a desk review, and from our desk review, we discovered the barriers to women participation in political space. One of the barriers was traditional barriers. There are a whole lot of traditional policies that limit women from participating in political and leadership position in our country. Another barrier was women themselves have been made to understand that women belong in the back. They are not to take any leadership space in the country. So what we did was we involved stakeholders in our training. At first, it was challenging because they saw the project as a challenge to tradition in the country. The country is a highly traditional country where women are not to engage into any political or decision-making space.
Sorry to interrupt you again, Loretta. Would you mind maybe turning your video off, because we're having a bit of trouble with the sound, and maybe that will improve the audio. We can hear you though. Yeah, it's just a little bit muffled. But thank you for speaking slowly and loudly. Okay. Go ahead.
So we started off with training the stakeholders to get involved into the implementation of the SDG, because the main purpose of the training was all of the SDG, the Liberia Gender Action Plan came about. But then over the time, since the development of the Liberia Gender Action Plan, there has not been any implementation. The implementation to the Liberia Gender Action Plan has been very weak. That's why you find male dominant in all sectors of our country. So we had to train stakeholders and train the women. We trained 60 women, all of 3 women groups in the country. And after their training, they took lead in the project implementation. One of the things they did was to create awareness throughout the county. They created awareness on radio, through jingles, town hall meetings, and live studio discussion. And after their awareness, they went about doing an affirmative action, which was to engage stakeholders through a dialogue meeting. And they had a dialogue meeting. It took a little while to have the dialogue meeting because of our election process in December. So they had a dialogue meeting in February, where they engaged stakeholders of that county to create space for women implementation, for women participation in politics. The dialogue meeting, during the dialogue meeting, there was a petition presented to the leadership of that county. They gladly accepted the petition, and they are in the process of convening another meeting that they will respond to the women's petition. And another thing again is that the women involvement in the implementation of our national gender policy was to create awareness that since women make up the largest portion of the voting population in the country, women should support women. So one of the awareness messages was women for women support, which has been lacking over the past, like 10 years and a half, it has been lacking. women don't support women because women have been made to understand that women are not to be in leadership position. So they rather support men than their own, fellow women. So through the Women for Women support, we had a female candidate in the county, the only female candidate we had during our senatorial elections. The female candidate has been running. She ran the first time. She had 16.6 votes. Then this year, through the awareness, she was able to come up with 32.55%. Even though she may not have won the election, but that was a plus for us because in the past it has not been happening. The women still cheated, and they even went to the election commission to protect their vote. So for us, I see this as a success for a highly traditional county that does not give right to women participation in politics or decision-making positions in our county. And we learned a lesson from the project. One of the lessons we learned from the project is that women could not support other women who have the ambition women who have the ambition to take up political space because of the traditional norm. But then once they get the right information, they will be able to support other women. So over the past time, on the Women2030 project, that was what we achieved.
Thank you. Yes, thanks so much, Loretta. Thank you for your contribution, for sharing with us your experience in Liberia and your great achievements, ultimately, that women are able to now support other women who have the ambition to take up political positions. So thank you for sharing with us those very inspiring outcomes. So I would like to now go over to our next speaker, to Lucy Mulinge from Indigenous Information Network in Kenya. Lucy will speak to us about women's leadership in Indigenous communities and protecting forests and claiming a space at the policy table. So thanks a lot. Lucy, I hand it over to you, and just a kind reminder to speak slowly and loudly for our interpreters and for our sign language people. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jeanette, and Honorable Minister, representative of the EU, fellow panelists, and also the organizers and all those who have joined us today. Thank you, and I greet you all from Nairobi. I was asked to talk about women leadership, and especially with a focus on Indigenous women at the ground level, the local women, the remote local women that we work with in our organization. And I must also say that leadership, women leadership has really proved and have been accepted now to be such a unique and dynamic part of our life in the whole world in terms of really impacting on development. And that's why we are seeing each and every other time that we have women leaders being appointed and also being taking a great role in terms of leading our development and our different countries where we are. It's also very interesting and really very proud to be always speaking about our Indigenous women, because indeed I have seen a lot of changes, especially when we started training them on sustainable development goals and also focusing on the Agenda 2030 and other development agendas. And the moment we went out to the community and started working with the women, we realized that there are quite a number of them with different and unique dynamic careers of their own. Most of them are illiterate, but in every of those communities, you find that you find one particular woman with a different kind of unique specialization. From the finance, they want to advise them on finance, they want to give them advice on what to do when there is a crisis, one who is on environment, those in the health sector who are in their own health sector where they provide traditional medicine and they know the medicinal plants, and those also who are experts in terms of looking at food security and how they can actually plant vegetables, not only trees alone for shade or for shelter or for anything, but also to have trees that give them food. And it is these particular same women leaders who came up with different innovations, where innovations they decided we are planting trees, we are planting different different things within our own farms, but we must make sure we also try to sell them and get some money, because one of the key issues is a question of economic empowerment. And this was very interesting for us as an organization, because we decided to make our trainings to be very participatory, so that the women can be able to be the ones to say, as soon as they hear, they already have ideas. And the most dynamic thing also is that we tried as much as possible to have exchange visits, so that they can be able to learn from each other, to be able to hear other people speaking, other women who have got similar kind of geographical setting, and also have the same kind of traditions, because we are talking about women who are already leading a traditional way of life, and they have more challenges. They are not given that opportunity to be leaders where they are. But after their trainings and after them being innovative and having somebody listening to them, and that they could voice something, they could speak out and their voices could be heard, you find more changes in their own community. And building these leaders in the community is very, very important, because we have seen them really being resilient, looking at issues of climate change and looking on how they can be able to learn and to be able to share. Here you can see among themselves, after going all through the process of training in SDG and especially on Women 2030, they are able to do their work on their own, to do their own training. And I really thank Global Forest Coalition for saying, let's sub-grant them, let them be able to kind of do their own trainings and come up with their own recommendations. So when they sit around and listening to each other, listening to their own, telling them some things, and you are there observing, it's really very enriching, because you see that you build in leadership within them, and you are able to really, despite the fact that they are in very fragile environments, but they are able to do something, and they are able to recognize how it's important to be able to be informed, to be able to know what they can be able to do as an alternative to be able to make their lives better. COVID-19 also taught them that they were ready for it, to be able to really continue managing their own life and trying to see, despite all the lockdown limitation of movement, as leaders, they were able to sit down. And as I said, they have different, especially this particular group is very important, because when we were there, we were really shocked to find one of them who is the one who advises them in finance, for example, telling them what they can be able to do. Since in that particular place, they can't plant any food because they come to very delicate environment with the drought and so on, but they were able to come up with what do they want to do. And what they came up to do, they knew how to get the money to buy the goats and sheep that they were buying and feeding them, and then later on being able to sell them. And they were advised, and they're even told when to do that and when to do this. So we found it very dynamic way of doing it. And the other thing about the richness we have in Kenya, especially when it comes to cultures and traditions, we have quite a number of different communities. The first ones you saw in the planting area is they live just next to the Mau forest, which is a forest which we know is our water tower and has really gone through a lot of dynamics. And now from Samburu, we come and meet these particular ones again from the North Rift, where they are able also to be ladies from one community of the Pokot. And for them, coming together this way is historical, to be able to talk together, to be able to not only talk as women, but also bring in youth. We have young women there who are also learning from their elders, and to be able to bring that leadership among them is very, very crucial. Behind them is a hut which they use as a meeting room. And I think that has also made them to be able to get together, because normally everyone has a lot of activities out there in the community, and they're able to get together and really work and and make a lot of difference in the work they are doing. One other important thing that I'd like to say is that despite the fact that we see that there is great leadership out in the community level and also among Indigenous women in different spheres, and there is that unity of working together and be able to put their way and their voices out there, we still have a gap in terms of looking at laws and instruments that are there, and for the women to be able to understand those particular legal terms and other very complicated issues that are really used. But one important thing is always to make sure that we be able to simplify as much as possible for us to be able to make a difference in them. They understand and they know the climate change, they know the problems they face in different areas, and all the community work that they do and the discussion we have is in their local languages, so they are able to do that. And I'm bringing this up because Indigenous people, Indigenous women, we have dynamic ways of working together, and it's very important that this particular Agenda 2030 recognizes that. And we hope that the project can continue, the program can continue, and be able to reach out as many as possible, even in the other parts of Africa and also in the other parts of the world. And I really do thank you for this opportunity and hope that we can be able to share more as we continue. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Lucy. Thanks so much for sharing your experiences working with Indigenous women's groups. I would like to introduce our next speaker and our final speaker, Ida Bakturidze from Women Engaged for a Common Future in Georgia. Ida will speak to us about feminist advocacy and changing legislation on gender quotas in Georgia. So I give the floor to you, Ida, and just a kind reminder to please speak slowly and loudly. Thanks.
Thanks, Janet. Hello, everyone. My name is Ida Bakturidze, and I'm from Georgia and would like to share with you the specific experience of Georgia women's movement related to gender quotas and changing legislation in Georgia. I will start with that. Georgia was one of the first countries where women have won the right to vote and to be elected. Georgian parliament had 5 female members in 1919, but women's participation has been mostly stagnating over the past 25 years, rising only to 14% in 2020 before elections from 7% in 1995. The situation is even worse at the local level, where women hold no governorship out of 9, 1 mayor post out of 64, and only 13% of seats in local councils. In some municipalities, not a single woman holds a seat on the local councils. As a result, more than half of Georgian population has a minimal say in the political process affecting their daily lives. Legislation is written by the male representatives based on their analysis of the needs and priorities of the population, and without an assessment of policy implications for women. According to UNDP's new Equal Future platform in 2020, Georgia ranked at the worrying 53rd place out of 56 countries in Europe and Central Asia, stating that if current trends prevail, the country stands almost no chance of reaching the Sustainable Development Goals target of gender parity of parliamentary representation by 2030. Public opinion researchers identify that political parties are the main barriers of women's political participation in Georgia. They are the ones responsible, and it's their political will to provide balanced elections lists. Therefore, development of political parties culture in the country is crucial. It's impossible to achieve gender balance in the country without having stable and strong political parties that realize the importance of women's political participation and their role in addressing the problem. In 2011, the Parliament of Georgia, after intensive advocacy from the women's rights activists, adopted legislation on financial incentives for women's participation in political party lists. However, the 2 major competing parties, the United National Movement and Georgian Dream, did not use the existing mechanisms of the voluntary quotas and did not put more women in the winnable positions despite increased financial incentives in 2013. Georgia's voluntary quota mechanism has been assessed as ineffective as the financial incentives it envisages has not resulted in more women being selected as candidates or elected. The need of women's empowerment in political lives has become a highly debated topic in 2014, and the Task Force on Women's Political Participation in Georgia was established by local civil society and international organizations. So that the task force has been actively advocating for amendments of the election codes of Georgia to introduce mandatory party quotas in parliament. And on 8 March 2015, the Georgian women's movement held a demonstration called More Women in Parliament in 25 cities throughout the country in support. In June 2015, the task force submitted its first initiative for mandatory gender quotas to the Georgian parliament. The initiative was adopted by the Human Rights Committee, but struck down by the parliament's legal committee. Third, the task force and Georgian women's movement realized they need to mobilize the public to call on their elected officials to do more to ensure women were represented in elected and leadership roles in government. In 2017, a petition of 37,000 signatures by the wider public, the second bill was submitted to Parliament with the support of task force. 3 parliamentary committees endorsed the bill. The proposal enjoyed remarkable support from civil society groups, foreign diplomats accredited in Tbilisi, public defender, prime minister office, and the speaker of parliament. The opposition was forming heavily against the bill despite the outside support. As a result of the division within the ruling party, the bill fell short of required 76, obtaining only 66 votes. After the rejection of the bill, parliamentary chair announced that the ruling party planned to present a new bill on gender quotas next week, which would guarantee at least 25% of MPs to be women. But only in July 2020, the parliament introduced a mandatory 1 in 4 gender quota for party lists. The quota became 1 in 3 starting with the October 2028 parliamentary elections and expires after 2032. Parties that exceeded the quota and entered parliament, our funding is required to be spent on supporting parties' women's wings, although no enforcement mechanism qualified for additional state fundings. Nevertheless, women and their interests remain underrepresented at all levels of government, and women won only 31 seats in the 2020 parliamentary elections, which is only 20% of the whole parliament, which means that even so-called critical minority of 30% has not been achieved yet in Georgia, which allows women the opportunity to have an impact on decision-making process. Although we have gender quotas in Georgia as a result of the tireless work of women's groups, Sustainable Development Goals target on gender parity in parliamentary representation by 2030 still remains a challenge for Georgia as well as for many other countries. Therefore, we continue to fight for our equal participation, and this fight will end when we achieve full parity of Georgian politics. Thank you for attention.
Thank you so much, Ida. Thank you for your presentation and sharing the work of the Georgia women's movement to influence parliament and legislation on gender quotas. And of course, a lot has been achieved, but I hear that there are still more challenges to achieve parity there, but congratulations on what you and your movement have done so far. So we have time for questions now. I would invite our participants to please ask your questions in the chat. We also have collected a few questions throughout the event that I would like to pose to our speakers now. And again, I would like to thank our amazing speakers who are all trailblazers in their countries. We've heard such inspiring stories of women's organizing, networking, feminist analysis, advocating for legislative change. And we would like to hear more from you as well to answer some of these questions from our audience. So first, I would like to call upon Wanun. There are some questions for you. If you are able to put your video on and unmute yourself. So the question was, thank you for sharing. We love this example of a locally led effort being engaged towards the SDGs. The question is, did you find there were barriers for local efforts to be aware of SDG indicators? Has the national government included these efforts in SDG reporting?
Thank you very much for the question. For the first one, yeah, the very first key challenge is the fact that understanding the SDG indicators are really challenging for the local communities and local women. So they think that it doesn't really respond and taking into their concerns, and it's more a numeric, numbers, which doesn't mean anything to them. So that's why when we are starting with engaging with the local communities, we are not talking about the global SDG or the national SDG, but we are looking at the ways they are doing. And you probably be aware that communities are already doing sustainable development. So the way they are having their livelihood is already sustainable. So it's not like asking them to understand the SDG, but those in the SDG forum needs to understand the way they are having their life and having their own ways of sustainability. So that's how we reverse it in such a sense that looking at what communities need in order to monitor the sustainable development from their own perspectives, and we have that local indicators. The government doesn't really include these efforts into the reporting. For example, in the VNR for the first year in 2017. So we had to find a way to have dialogue with the local and also the national governments as well when they are doing the VNR. Of course, all the calls and demands and kind of this process at that time was not included and it was not recognized. So that's, and that has led to further actions and further advocacy up until now. And this year, Thailand is also doing the second VNR. So together with the local communities and other CSOs, we are doing an independent report, and that would also incorporate the outcomes and findings of national implementation of the SDG according to the local indicators. And in terms of the support and financial support, for the whole process, for the first year and a half, we got the support from Women2030 through APWLD. And for the advocacy part and others in terms of like using those indicators to monitor the SDG implementation, we are trying to get some other funding as well in order to come up with, to maintain the movement and to maintain the monitoring process of these women, and also to do with the shadow report. Yeah, I hope I answered.
Thank you so much, Wanun. And also we have some time for a question for Lucy. Lucy, the question for you is, what are the most important recommendations and demands that came out of the trainings that you did in communities? Lucy, I wonder if you can unmute yourself and maybe your video so you can respond to that question.
Yes, I think one of the key areas that were really challenging for them and they wanted it to be emphasized on was the issue of being able to first understand the laws, the legal laws that are on, and also to be able to participate and be recognized by the authorities, the government, people. And I think there is one of the photos that we didn't show, but we were able to really make sure that the indigenous women are able to also go to the administration, identify themselves, and be able to invite the same administration in their meetings so that they can recognize the vital role that they play in the development of the whole constituency, the whole area that they work in. So the issue of recognition is very crucial, and that is one of them. And the other issue, of course, is the challenges that are faced by most of the women because of climate change, because even despite the fact that they are doing a lot of work in terms of planting trees and doing forestry work, there's that challenge that the rains don't come anymore, there's prolonged droughts, and there's other challenges that have come like COVID, for example. So that is also one of the key challenges that they really wonder. But the good thing is that there is the issue of mainstreaming within themselves in the different activities that they do. So we still need a lot of work to be done in terms of localizing the recommendations and the SDGs up to the ground level, all the SDGs, and also to be able to look at other laws within the country. But we are lucky in Kenya, we have the SDG Forum, and we have actually introduced most of the women who are able to use the WhatsApp and continue working with the other, join the other SDG forums to know what is going on and how they can bring it out to the community. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Lucy. We have one more question for Ida. Ida, the question is, have you had men supporting your efforts in your work in Georgia?
Yeah, we had partners in the parliaments, men MPs, and also some supporters outside of the parliament. We had a big discussions. Of course, many opposite positions were between men and women, and even women are not supporters. Some women are not supporters even as a politician, women of gender quotas, but still, yeah, we had male supporters, male MP supporters also.
Thanks, Ida. Thank you for responding to that. And I believe that that's as far as we can go with answering questions for this event. We're almost out of time. I would really like to, again, thank all of our inspiring speakers. Thank you for responding to our questions, for sharing your stories. And there was actually a question in the chat about our shadow report. So before closing, I would really like to highlight that we have published this Global Shadow Report in July 2020. This is a result of 5 years of feminist analysis of implementation of the SDGs across the world, including on women's public policy participation. So you can access the link in the chat. So I really invite you to have a read of that. Thanks again to our interpreters, our sign language interpreters, our Russian, French, Spanish interpreters, our live captioning. I would really like to thank all of our participants for engaging today, asking questions. We continue the fight for parity, for gender equality, for women's participation in public policy. So thank you again to everybody, and I hope to see you next time. And the last thing I want to say is do keep in touch with us. You can see on the slide here our organizations, our websites, our Twitters, and let's continue the discussion and the networking. Thanks, everyone. Goodbye, have a good day. Good night.
Bye, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I know it. Yes, yes, yes.